Gators Breakdown episode 69 is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. My two co-hosts tonight, Joey and Bill, were not able to be here with us tonight. So I got a little bit things going different here on this episode of Gators Breakdown. So joining me tonight as a guest co-host is Will Miles from SEC Country. And you can find Will on Twitter at WillMilesSEC. And we'll talk about some of his latest work here on the show. Will, thanks for jumping in and helping me out here on Gators Breakdown.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
And Will, our guest tonight is former Gators tight end, all SEC Mackey Award finalist from 2000 to 2003, Gator great Ben Troupe. Ben, thanks for joining us here on Gators Breakdown. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I like the whole Gator great thing. That's pretty humbling. I like that stuff.
One of the best Gators tight ends from everything I can remember. Ben Troupe is one of my favorite tight ends. You know, the hurdles and the Dragon, Ole Miss, and Georgia players. It never gets old seeing that.
I mean, you know what, man? You do what you got to do. It's survival out there, man. People jumping and flipping and turning. Listen, man, I use fear as a tool, man. I mean, I know y'all think Ben can take big hits. I try to avoid them as much as possible, man. I try.
Thanks to Brushwood Media for setting this up, Ben, and getting you on here. But let Gator Nation know what you've been up to. So, and we know you went to the NFL. Has some years there with the Titans. But since then, and in recent years, what have you been up to? And let Gator Nation know that out there.
I've been doing a lot of speaking engagements, man. I don't consider myself a speaker. I consider myself more of a storyteller. I got a lot of stories, man, and I try to be able to enlighten the youth. I think that the youth is I know that the youth are people that, feel as though they don't have a voice. I feel as though I'm the voice of the youth. Been doing a lot with sports radio, as well as working with the NFL through the NFL ambassadors, man. So I've been pretty busy, man. Been pretty fortunate enough to, find another niche for myself, man. I never thought I would find something that replaced football, man. But hey, man, it's something about being behind a mic, man. You don't have to see my face. Right now they get to see the voice, man. So I've been enjoying the transition.
Yeah, I started this podcast almost a year ago, and I tell you, it's taken off. And you're right; it's fun. You get your voice out there, and Gator Nation is fun interacting with out there.
Oh yeah, man. I listen. When you think about the fact that everything I've done is because of the University of Florida, I always say that, man. And I go around the country, and we're the only team that has the Florida Gators. You got a lot of orange and other orange and blues and things of that nature. But to be, you're always going to get two questions. Did you win a national championship, and do you know Tim Tebow? And I say no to both. Well, I've met Tim Tebow, but I've never won a national. But to know that I was once a part of that, that great tradition, man, I get to be known as, a player that came in there and made a name for itself, man. It's a blessing, man. It's humbling.
All right, folks out there, remember you can find all your Gators Breakdown episodes on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. Just search on those sites. Get the links by following us on Twitter at Gators Breakdown, and on Facebook, just search Gators Breakdown. Also, please share the show if you like it. Leave a review and rate on iTunes. So, Ben, let's talk these current Gators a little bit. And, of course, the hot topic is quarterback Malik Zaire. I'm interested in what you think could be happening in the locker room coming up this summer. The team has already went through a spring practice with Felipe Franks, and coming out of that, him being the starter for the 2017 season. Then here comes Zaire, and he'll definitely compete for the starting job. You've been in this position. We can only dream about being in that Florida Gator locker room. What could bringing Zaire in right now do to this team? Could it backfire, or is this much to do about nothing?
It's much to do about nothing. I mean, you look at the fact that look at Appleby and Del Rio last year. It was a real similar situation. You got two guys that were both coming in, to try to compete. Zaire is a guy that, obviously he comes with a lot of fanfare. He comes with a lot of athleticism, and once you've been in college football long enough, you understand that the best players are always going to be highly touted, whether you was at another school or not. So Zaire is not going to be a guy that's going to come in and ruffle any feathers, because he got to show and prove too. What he did in Notre Dame is great, but he got to come here and show that he can be, a viable asset. Now I'm pretty sure Felipe, and Del Rio and those guys, they're not going to just give the position to him. So just because he came here, it's not going to be a situation where, just because you got 1 year left, you're going to play. You got to go out there and prove that you can be the starter for this team.
Definitely so, and I think Will's going to follow up right here.
Yeah, so I guess, one of the things is that there's a lot of talk about competition in terms of, bringing in Zaire as competition for Franks. But, the way I see it, it seems like if Zaire's coming in, he's really coming in to start. And so do you really think Franks is going to get any meaningful snaps over the course of the year, unless there's an injury with Zaire coming in?
It's really gonna decide like how Zaire picks up the offense. I mean, people still remember he got to pick up this offense and be able to go out there and run it effectively. I mean, Felipe is a guy that I really think is gonna put pressure on Zaire. And if Zaire is the best man for the job, I mean, he's gonna go out there and play. But I always look at it like, are you trying to have a one-year wonder, or are you trying to build a guy for the future? I think Felipe is a guy that's going to be, a guy for the future, 3 and 4 years down the line. But if Zaire can go out there and take the reins and he wins the job fair and square, man, I mean, Felipe just got to understand that that's college football, man. You get made a lot of promises in recruiting, but just like that movie, The Program, man, you know what, man? What happened to all the chilies, man? You here now, man. All that stuff is over with. You got to compete.
What we're kind of talking about extends to Bill Sykes, who helped set this up. Bill had a question, and it kind of feeds right into this. He wants to know, could the tight end route trees, assuming Zaire is more read option than Felipe Franks is, could the tight ends and their routes be changed in this offense? Does the tight ends roles change with whoever's behind center?
Yeah, I think so. I think that we have interchangeable tight ends that can do that. I think when you look at Goolsby and Ciante, I think those guys can go out there and do whatever's asked. But whenever you start making one position specific to just the quarterback play, I think it's going to hurt the offense. You got to have a guy that can translate his skills to what the offense does well. We run the football, we play action pass, and we try to do ground and pound and trying to utilize the run game to open up the pass. If you're trying to go to one specific type of offense and defense these days, man, you're not going to be able to beat them one-dimensionally. I think it's going to hurt the offense in the long run, because while the tight ends are developing, what is that saying for the outside guys? So I just rather have a guy that can translate his skills better to what the offense is already doing.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And let's keep up with these current tight ends. You mentioned DeAndre Goolsby, Ciante Lewis, and Kamori Gamble is going to be coming in and probably pushing for some playing time. It kind of seems like you get the opposite with DeAndre Goolsby and Ciante Lewis. Goolsby more known as the catcher and, struggles at blocking at times. Ciante Lewis, a better blocker and struggles at catching at times and in, especially clutch situations a lot. What are you looking for those guys to take the next step and be more reliable for Jim McElwain, Doug Nussmeier, and these quarterbacks?
They got to fight for snaps. You got to make the team want to, be able to call plays for you. Just because you have athleticism, you're at the University of Florida, so obviously you're going to be very athletic. But the way Ciante played against Georgia, the way Goolsby played against, Iowa, you got to have those games week in and week out. The most consistent players go out there and show and make plays every single week. You're not going to always have, 5 or 6 catches, but you got to be a focal point of the offense. That way, Nussmeier and those guys say, listen, we got to find a way to get our tight ends more involved, because they easily get lost. And even if they do have good games, it's kind of easily forgotten because they have good seasons, but it has to be a consistent week in and week out. That's something that when I was in school, they told us, you got to fight for snaps. You got to fight for coaches to want to put plays in for you. Other than that, you're just going to be another guy on offense.
So how does that apply to pass protection then? Because it seems like Florida's offensive line struggled a little bit last year, particularly with guys off the edge, Barnett from Tennessee, and other guys like that who could get a step on David Sharp, the left tackle. So I'm curious as to what you think about Florida's tight ends and pass protection, and whether either Kamori Gamble or some of the new guys can step up in that capacity.
I think it goes back to what we was talking about earlier. If you're not that big of an asset in the passing game, we're gonna try to find a way to help you keep that quarterback upright. You gotta be able to be interchangeable. Now, if you're a guy, I understand that our tackles had some troubles last year, and being able to help the tight end and being able to help the tackle is just a part of the tight end position. But our tight ends I don't think defenses game plan for them. I don't think they scare other defenses. So I would make them pass block until they prove they can go out there and be in the passing game. The last thing a tight end wants to do is pass block. I can run block all day. Don't let me pass. That's how I get noticed. So if you get it to the point where that all they're doing is pass blocking and they're not going out in the route, that should make them want to get out there, because I don't think nobody in the SEC can cover those guys, really.
Yeah, I really do think, we've seen flashes, and as you mentioned, but it has to be week in and week out. And that's what this tight end position is missing, and that's pretty much what the whole offense is missing. And that kind of goes back to, to Jim McElwain. Ben, What has been your impression in Michael Wayne's 2 seasons? I know you had your own podcast, and you were kind of going week in and week out with the team as well with your thoughts. But going back and looking at the last 2 seasons, are there excuses for why the offense has been struggling this 2 years? We know the quarterback problems that has been talked about at length and at depth. Or for Florida, is it more than just the quarterbacks? Is Michael Wayne and Nussmeier not getting the job done themselves? What's been your impression of Michael Wayne so far?
I think he's done a great job given the situation. We haven't had consistent quarterback play. Listen, we played 2 years ago. We played at the University of Georgia. We ran we threw the football 5 times. We won. That should tell you all you need to know about what we were lacking. I love Treon. I would give him a hug if I've seen him, but let's face it, we got to call it what it is. It was bad, and the mere fact that we could still win the East. SEC championship game 2 years ago obviously got out of hand this year, and we don't have consistent quarterback play. We didn't have consistent offensive line play because no matter how good your QB is, he got to be upright. So the offensive line is definitely something that has to be addressed. But you look at what to do when Will Grier was there, until after that 7th game. We was clicking, and the best teams in the nation, they're gonna have consistent quarterback play. You don't even have to have the best quarterback play, but if we can get a consistent play caller that develops a rapport with those receivers, I think it's going to be scary, man, because we doing what we doing minus a bad offense. Not a bad offensive line, but bad offensive line play, bad quarterback play. You give us consistent QB play as well as offensive line protection and run blocking, we're going to be scared. We're going to be a scary team to deal with.
Well, that's obviously, I think, what McElwain's looking for with Zaire coming in. I guess, you certainly lived through the transition from Spurrier to Zook, and then the Fire Ron Zook era, FireRonZook.com era as well a little bit. I'm curious as to whether the players sense that, and that if the heat starts getting turned up later in the year, is that going to impact the team at all, or is that something that you guys are sort of isolated from?
I hope it would impact them. I hope if you understand that, if it's a coach that you love playing for, and the players definitely they love playing for him, if the seat gets hot, which when you at it, listen, let's face it, the University of Florida is one of the premier coaching jobs, not just in college, in the country. It's a place that you cannot hide. Jim McElwain understood that, coming behind Will Muschamp. And I think he's done a good job, but at a certain point, good isn't good enough in Florida. We've had 2, kind of subpar good seasons, and I think sometimes when you win the East and you play Alabama, and we was able to redeem the bowl game last year, but look at Florida State. It's like you got to, and it's always a barometer. So I think Coach Mack understands, man, that look, while you've been able to do something Steve Spurrier wasn't able to do his first 2 years, Nick Saban wasn't able to do his first 2 years. Now you're going to have to be able to win not just win the East, but, compete and win an SEC championship game and potentially compete for a national.
Then you brought up Florida State, and I kind of want to get your opinion about those guys as well. When you were there, it was more an even matchup. But, of course, recently we've seen the gap ever since Urban Meyer left, has been widening with Jimbo Fisher, FSU, and what we've seen from Florida. Is it, the scores have not shown it, but is it getting closer, in your opinion, the gap between FSU and Florida?
I hope it is. Like you said, the score hasn't shown it, but Florida has to play 4 quarters of football. When you look at the fact that last time, I think Ron Zook won, I think his last time playing Florida State. Florida State plays Florida in a way that you like how we used to play. We don't like each other. There is no other at all. I don't even know what a panhandle of Florida is. It doesn't exist, in my opinion. I don't think they got the nicest uniforms. And I think what happens is social media. It's like when LeBron plays KD. The game. Y'all hanging out before the game. Y'all really are buddies. I don't have buddies that play for Florida State. I don't have, and the thing is, it has to mean something to you. The same, the mentality that Florida has when they play Georgia, I don't think it's the same when they play Florida State. And that's one of the biggest rivalries in college football. But let's face it, Jimbo Fisher has outcoached every coach in the state of Florida the last 3 years. He's undefeated against us. He's undefeated against Miami. He's undefeated against USF. And until we can, find a way to even, go out there and compete, it's been laughable the last couple of years, man. It really has.
So what do you think the fans should be looking for in that first game against Michigan to sort of, see that we're really sort of on that right track? Is there something that you can pinpoint that you think they should be looking for right out of the gate first quarter, or is it something you think they should, what they should be looking for is Scarlett taking over in the fourth? Just, give us a feel for what you think is the important thing for people to take from that game.
I think we want to come out and show that, man, we ready to play from the opening go. Because let's face it, Michigan, they coming to embarrass us. They not look. It's a nationally televised game. Harbaugh don't like the fact that the SEC gets all this pub. Nobody likes the SEC network. I think we have to be able to put our foot on the neck from the opening go. You cannot let up on this team. I mean, remember what Michigan did to us? I mean, that's the type of stuff that bothers me. It's like if I'm a freshman, they go, "Well, I was in high school." Well, you got to take it personal because, and what Coach McElwain is doing, he's doing that kind of Nick Saban type-esque in the sense of, I want my team to play a real first game. We're not gonna get no, powder puff type school that's gonna, we get to pad our stats. If we don't come out and play the first game, you're gonna have a lot of players, me personally, a lot of former players, alumni, fans. We're gonna be like, Coach Mac, he's gonna have to turn his cell phone off. Because I'm telling you, if you're gonna play Michigan, let's play, man. So I'm not looking for no excuses, because if Michigan can, they're gonna embarrass us. We need to have that same mentality from the opening go.
I definitely agree there. And I was going to ask you about this Michigan game too. Well, you were at Florida, and Florida's kind of been slammed for this, about not playing, teams or teams of caliber for that first game of the season. What do you think the mindset is? When you were in school, you had a couple Miami games early, but not the first game of the season. What needs to change? Because we've seen Florida come out. The offensive line looked very lackluster the last couple of years against the Powder Puffs, as you said. What needs to change this offseason for Michigan is game one? You need to come out firing. Is there a mindset from the coaches, or is it the players to take it upon themselves?
Accountability. Everybody wants to play in Florida until you have to step out there and represent the orange and blue. Everybody thinks they want to play in this league, in this prestigious university. So what Coach Mack is doing, he said, okay, we about to separate the real from the fake. Some of us just talk about it, and we good at talking about it. But what happens when, forget the SEC network, watching, you prime time. This is like Monday Night Football for college football, and you can't hide. So to all the Florida alums, break out your Florida stuff. Don't be the kid at the Cavs game with a Warriors jersey underneath. That's the crazy thing I've ever seen in my life. It's what Coach Mack is saying is, we ain't afraid of nobody. That's what I like that about him, to be like, listen, sink or swim, I believe in my players. So Harbaugh is the type of guy, you understand, man, he's trying to take over college football, man. He don't think that any team could beat him. So I like the approach we having. And some of these players think they want to play big boy football. But come Saturday night, we're going to see. We're going to definitely see.
So with that in mind, I guess I'd like to get your thoughts on the situation with Antonio Callaway, and whether you think he should be suspended or not, and sort of what maybe his teammates are thinking about somebody who gets caught in a situation like that during the offseason, knowing that Michigan is coming that first week of the year.
Yes, most definitely he should get suspended. And the reason why he should get suspended, to let his teammates know, it doesn't matter to him. It's not important enough. Callaway should be the last person getting in trouble with Florida. He should be the last person getting in trouble, in college football. That would, man, look, it's like Josh Gordon. How many chances do you get before the league goes, we're going to move on from you? Callaway is super duper talented, but at a certain point, his talent won't be good enough. It shouldn't be a Callaway headline about getting suspended anymore. So the thing about it is, they're going to make him stand on the sideline and listen and put the camera on him the whole game. Anytime you get the show, it wasn't important enough. The thing about college football is, yes, we 17, 18, 19, 21, 20 years old. But we signed the national letter of intent. We understand too much is given, much required. But I think his teammates should definitely, feel like abandoned and neglected by him, because everybody got the same amount of time on and off the field. It's just, I don't understand why Callaway keep finding himself on the wrong side of the NCAA rules and regulations. I just don't get it. Save my life.
All right, Ben. Thanks for joining here on Gators Breakdown. I got a couple more questions for you, if you don't mind hanging out with us for a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay. Being from the state of Georgia, and we know lately, let's move to recruiting a little bit. Justin Fields, hotshot quarterback out of Kennesaw, Georgia, 5-star quarterback. Florida's in the mix now since his decommitment from Penn State. Him being from Georgia, being a Georgia recruit, you're from Georgia, you chose Florida. What kind of pressure is there to stay in state? Because if you kind of look around now, Georgia's also going to be in the mix for Justin Fields with now his decommitment, and even more than the mix than some so believe. So what kind of pressure is there to stay in state in the state of Georgia?
A lot more now than back when I came out because of the, you add in social media, it's more pressure, it's more notoriety. Like kids are more well known now. So while I could hide, because for one, I played the tight end position, not the quarterback position, it's going to be one of the biggest signings, coming up this year. I think that he's really going to have to ask himself, do I stay in my home state of Georgia because it's comfortable, or am I willing to go to a Florida and compete? And the reason why I chose Florida because they play Georgia every year, and no greater feeling in the world than to be able to beat your home state team, man. It's the best.
Here,
I want to Georgia. So I just think that, he has to really ask himself, what do he want? Do I want to be a home? I say this. You want to be a homegrown guy and never beat Florida? Or do you want to go to Florida and never lose to Georgia? It's up to him. It's up to him.
I love that answer.
Oh, well, I'm sort of curious as to what you thought about some of Spurrier's pokes at the opposition when you were playing them. You can't spell citrus without UT, and really sort of sticking it to Georgia. I'm just curious as to how you guys felt about that kind of stuff.
Very, very witty. Coach Spurrier. Listen, Coach Spurrier had the best players in college football, so he knew that you still got to line up and play us. So while people do this bulletin board material, it's like somebody going, well, Ben, who you think going to win out of you and UT? Us. Did you just say that? Like, what am I supposed to say? That they're going to – and the thing about Spurrier is Spurrier understands I'm just a coach. I get my kicks out of saying a bunch of crazy stuff. Listen, man, Spurrier told South Carolina, he said, I told y'all, as long as we winning, I'm going to stay. These boys stink, and I'm out of here. He's about his – I love Coach Spurrier, man, because he's honest. He's honest, man. The man won a Duke. If you win a Duke, you get a chance to say whatever you want to say. So I loved it, man, because Coach Spurrier never, ever did anything malicious enough to really take away from the team. But Spurrier, listen, if I got y'all talking about what I said before the game, I'm distracting y'all, and we're going to light that scoreboard up, and that's usually what happens.
Ben, this is a hot topic for recruiting coming up, and it's kind of different with a rule change now, the early signing period. So if you could go back to when you were recruited, would you have liked the early signing period where you sign in December and go to a school? Is it more of a deterrent while you're kind of concentrating on your own, senior year at high school? Is it a good thing for high school recruits, or is it a bad thing for high school recruits?
I think it's bad because it's putting more pressure on them to do something they probably wouldn't have done anyway. Like the kid is going to be there. What is December gonna do? And it's not like I'm gonna play. That just means that I think Brock Berlin did it or something by the time I got there. But 18 years old, it's so much pressure on them to pick a school. Then I got a deadline now. What about the prom? I'm a bun. I worked 4 years to finally get to a place where I'm comfortable. Now when I got to go to college. Now I just think that with so many regulations, everything falls on the players. And I just think that getting there in December compared to getting there in June of the next year, I think it's ridiculous, man, because it's making players think that I have to do it. Like pretty soon, you're going to have a lot of players going to December because they feel as though they have to. Kind of like in the NFL when they got, mini camp compared to OTAs. Mm-hmm. I get penalized if I don't show up to OTAs. Well, it's not mandatory. So I just think that the NCAA just find little ways to put more pressure on these kids to make, adult decisions when they ain't ready for it.
So what kind of modifications would you like to see to the recruiting process to make it, less stress or less pressure on the kids? Or do you just think that's part of the deal and, helps prepare you for when the lights turn on?
I would not allow kids to post when they're going to official visits on social media. I don't think they should do that. I would not allow kids to say, I just received another offer. I don't think I would do coaches to have cell phone access to these kids, because if Nick Saban is texting me, come on. Am I really? And you got this is the biggest decision I'm gonna make in my life. You know how many kids pick schools because of these rock star coaches and they never play? I'm going there because Harbaugh coaches at Michigan. I'm going, instead of saying, is this the best school for me to play? It's so much pressure on these kids. You got to let them be kids, and they don't get a chance to be that. And another thing I would do is this. These grown men that have these outlandish, crazy comments towards these young people, they should be thrown in jail. The stuff that I see on social media that people say because I didn't choose Florida over Florida State, you should go to jail. Get out your mama's basement and don't say, well, Ben, I don't sit behind a computer screen in a tweet. That's exactly what you're doing. I think that just like, when you monitor like terroristic threats. If a kid is being bullied by a grown man who's an alumni of Auburn and he chose Alabama, throw him in jail. I don't keep him in jail, but throw him in jail to let him know, listen, and take their social media account away. Because I see some recruiting, man, is crazy now, man. They're going to end up doing it's going to end up having like its own like little documentary series, man. Because it's gotten so much crazy since I came out.
Oh, reality show recruiting. That would ESPN would love that. Oh. All right. We had some viewer questions, Ben, since we put out there on social media that you'd be joining us. So we had some questions that were sent to us. Drew Rock wanted to know if you could answer why Georgia is always so overrated lately and Florida's underrated. Why does Georgia get the love that Florida doesn't seem to get?
Quarterback play. Georgia usually has in their mind a better quarterback, and usually whoever gets the better quarterback, usually gets the love. And I don't know, man. Georgia got a hype machine. I don't know how they do this. These dudes gonna find a way to be in the top 10 every year. I like it. I like the fact that Florida gets disrespected and Florida gets respected. We utilize that throughout the season, but Georgia got a high and those recruiting classes really help. But Georgia having those top 10 recruiting classes, that really helps with the hype.
Yeah, for sure. There, a couple more I got for you. I told you would probably be answered this one 10,000 times, but your favorite moment as a Gator, and that comes from David Kosk there.
My favorite moment as a Gator. All right, two things. My senior year when Gus Scott strips Chris Ricks and Keywan Rattler picks it up and he takes it like 70 yards. My mom said it was so loud in the stadium that she had my nephew on her lap. He was sleeping, but it was so loud that his body was trembling. His little body was like shaking from the screaming. And my second, really my best all time would be my junior year. We playing Auburn. We about to lose to them again. Oh, and freaking Bobby McCray blocked that kick, man. It's like 80,000 fans like quiet. You can hear a pin drop. And when he blocked it, I was like, man, this is why you play here. So, a lot of times people like, your greatest memories don't have nothing to do with you. I'm like, nah, man, I find more enjoyment watching these players do what they do, man. Hopefully I was somebody's favorite play, but my favorite plays always have to do with my teammates.
Patrick Hawk had this, and hopefully doesn't bleed into what you just said. What's the one story that you can share that most people don't know about you? It could be your time at Florida or in the NFL. But with this being Gators Breakdown, I guess we could say Gators, but maybe a story that people don't know.
Well, I developed my passion for speaking when I was at Florida. Obviously being a football player, we get Shands hospital visits, and most of the time you do one a year. After they go through the team, you just run out of days. And I noticed that my name started reappearing on the list. And this goes back to, a guy like Coach Zook letting me know just how big football was to people, what it meant to people. And I complained about it. You might have got a misprint. I've already done it. And this dude went off. He's like, what? And he told me, have you ever thought that you're being requested? Like people like wanna, see you in these facilities. And I just developed a love for people, man. I developed a love for speaking. And I'm not gonna lie, man. If I don't do that when I'm in Florida, man, I don't know where my career goes when I leave football, because I've been doing it ever since, man. And speaking to me, man, is just as incredible as when I, in my playing days. So I thank God for it, man. The Shands Hospital, man. I'm deeply indebted to those people.
Sounds good there. And one more, we'll probably know the answer to this. Biggest rival, most disliked team. I'm sure it's between FSU or Georgia.
God dang it. It's got to be Georgia. And the reason why it is, whenever you can't play at each other's stadiums, like think about it, actually going to Athens. Georgia couldn't imagine that. Listen, the fact that if it come down, they said something about one time it came that Georgia might have had one more ticket in Florida. They had to burn it. Like, y'all not getting one. I just think that embodies why we love football in both states. It's the best of both states, University of Georgia, University of Florida. And I think when you tell people from the North or the West Coast, football is religion in the South. They don't understand it. And I think the best like way to show that it's the biggest cocktail party in the world, man, because sometimes people use it as vague time, spend time with their family. And I just think that Georgia like, it's like your little brother, man. You never ever want your little brother to think they're going to be able to beat you. So hopefully we can keep that going.
Yeah, for sure. I was born in Jacksonville, but I was raised in South Georgia, so I kind of feel you there. Georgia's that most hated team. You know, you can't beat them enough. The score can't be high enough. You know, it's good. It's always good when you beat that red and black.
Oh yeah, man, it's the best, man. I never ever thought that I would get so caught up in the rivalry, but once you walk on the field, and the thing about Georgia is they got this false sense of entitlement. Like, why are y'all walking around with y'all chest out? Sit down, man. Like, and I like the fact too, like we beat them in 2001, they lost one game. And everybody like, oh, you know, or it's just that, listen, I want to beat Tennessee, I want to beat Florida State, I want to beat Auburn, Alabama. But I'm from the state of Georgia. The only reason why I can show my face is because they never beat me. So I'm 4-0. I need to get a shirt. I got to get some shirts printed.
Yeah, but I remember that 2002 game. It was the last time and one of the first times in a very, very long time the Florida Georgia game was a night game. And I drove down with all my Georgia friends from Georgia. And you're right, we gave them that only loss of the season, and it's probably one of my favorite games. I think we screened past them to death.
Oh, we did. I said that. I mean, listen, first and foremost, I scored the game with a touchdown against Thomas Davis, Mr. Right beside Luke, all pro Thomas Davis. But, you know, you run into players, I go, my dude, when y'all don't know how to adjust. We ran the same play like 100 times. The best thing that happened in that game
was Kelvin Kite and Carlos Perez, I think, taking it.
The best thing that happened in that game was Taylor Jacobs, he went out. He got hurt. So it forced Rex to spread the ball around. He ended up then he set the completion record for that game. Rex ran it in on a 2-point conversion. That was a crazy game, man. That was one. That's another great memory. Gus Scott, Jacksonville native, Trinity Christian, picked it off on DJ Shockley. I don't know who DJ is looking at. You have one receiver to that side, and you're gonna throw it late. You deserve everything you got. I'm not everything you got. Love it.
Right, so what do you think about the Georgia fans who complain that it's too far from Athens, that it's really a home game?
Hey man, listen, that's what happens when you lose. See, when you lose all the time, you get good at making excuses. I used to tell people, I said, you want a good excuse? Yeah, go to Georgia. They got the best excuses in the world. They got just excuse. And what happens is this: if Georgia was winning, they'll come up with another reason why. So it's not no home game, man. It's an NFL stadium, Jacksonville Jaguars Stadium. And the thing about it is at first we used to win because we had the psyche. Oh, we in their head and all this and that. I just think that I say this: Georgia, the Braves, obviously the Falcons, the Hawks, they ain't built for prime time. If you want Georgia to lose, let the whole world watch them. 28-3, people. 28-3. Come on. Jesus, man. 28-3.
That's not right.
It's the truth, man. 28-3. They made Tom Brady like legendary. He's iconic. Oh my God, man. Run the ball. Anyway, I'm just saying.
Will, you got anything else for getting off of here?
No, I'm good, Dave.
All right. Thanks to Brushwood Media again for setting this up for us. And Ben, anything out there to Gator Nation before you get out of here?
Hey man, just follow me. Ben Troupe 84, Ben Troupe Pro on Twitter. Follow me on Ben Troupe 84 on Instagram, man. Just be on the lookout for me, man. I would love to tell you where I'm going to be. I'm all over, man. Hopefully I'll be speaking to as many youth as possible. And
hey, we'll do it again, Ben, if you don't mind later, man.
Of course, man. Hey, man, I'm always listening. If it's Gator, if it's orange and blue, I'm here. If it's red and black, my phone don't work. So it's fine.
I'll remember that.
Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Ben. All right, Will. You had a new article that was posted. I guess it was posted today, right? On SEC Country?
Yes, sir.
And it was more about Florida's building their team under Jim McElwain more in the mold of Clemson and not Alabama. So is that I mean, of course, it goes to quarterback play a little bit. So, kind of explain to listeners out here, Will, what you were going through when you first thought about writing that article. What went behind it?
Yeah, so I wrote an article last week that talked about Malik Zaire and that it was kind of a mistake to play Zaire in 2017 just because, then you're going into 2018 with an unproven quarterback. And I got a pretty pretty loud response to that you play the best player and things like that. So I decided to sort of look and see, what programs that win national championships do, because that's really the goal, right? I mean, Urban Meyer, Steve Spurrier have set the standard at Florida. It's to win national championships. And if you look back at the last 11 years and who's won national championships, I mean, you got names like Saban and Urban Meyer, but you've got Les Miles, Gene Chizik, Jimbo Fisher, and those guys have all won national championships less than 4 years being at the school. Fisher was 4 years, and everybody else was 3 or less. And so the only outlier in that entire list is Dabo Swinney, and he's also the only person who's recruited at the same level as Jim McElwain. You look at Saban, you look at Meyer. I mean, those guys are bringing in top 3 classes pretty much right out of the gate as soon as they get past their first recruiting class. And so I just sort of wanted to look at that and understand, how did Swinney build the program, and what was it that led to Clemson becoming the national champions last year and making 2 years in a row.
Right, and Bill Sykes, who's on our show, he has this moniker, and me and him kind of, stars do matter, and that breaks into it, and and we've even had this, I guess, debate on Twitter the last couple of days, and one of his main points in bringing that up is you have to finish top 3 in your own conference. Getting to the college football playoff is relative to how you perform in your own conference. And in every playoff team so far has had a top 3 recruiting class in their conference, relative to their conference. So, while we know Clemson and Florida have recruited at a point to where their recruiting ranking average has been kind of similar the last few years, if you go and look at where Clemson has been ranked in the ACC, it is, in the top 3. Florida, meanwhile, while they have recruited very much the same as Clemson, you're looking at 5th, 6th, 7th places in the SEC. And that kind of seems to be the difference. And so, as we point to, that little stat there, and also it really lets you know, if you're not Alabama, how important quarterback play is.
Well, I mean, that's definitely true. And I mean, even Alabama, I mean, A.J. McCarron was a pretty damn good player. I mean, it wasn't something where he was just a scrub who was out there. I mean, I think, even John Parker Wilson was pretty good, but, more of a game manager type person than you would expect. I mean, the biggest thing with Florida, at least this year for me, is that the defense, I mean, I think people are just assuming it's going to be as good as it has been the last 4 or 5 years. And I don't necessarily see that. You lose 7 guys to the NFL. I get it. The guys who coming in are really skilled and they're really good players and they got some experience and showed that they can be good last year. But you get 1 or 2 injuries and all of a sudden you got a freshman in there, particularly at defensive tackle. I know Bill's talked about that a lot, that at defensive tackle, they're pretty thin, and somebody goes down, and all of a sudden you're getting the ball run down your throat. So, the defense is going to take a step back, and so it is a question of who are you bringing in, and you look at the history of teams that win national championships, and they really are top 10 classes on average over the 4 previous years before they win the championship. And usually you're talking top 5 nationally. So certainly you can do it. You can extrapolate that to conferences, but even at a national level, those teams that are winning national championships are recruiting up in that top tier.
Yeah, we've had a couple conversations and debates on Twitter the last couple of days, and my other co-host Joey brings up a lot that Nick Saban and the Alabama model in a way has ruined college football. Do you see that in a way with the way his success has translated and how teams have to chase Alabama and you probably really can't get there?
I think the thing that gets me about Saban is the idea of gray shirts, that you can that you can offer somebody a scholarship and essentially pull it from them at the end. That's not exactly what it is, but gray shirts eliminate or limit people's choices who want to commit to Alabama. I think that's maybe an area where there could be some restrictions that might give some other teams a fighting chance. But the reality is you're probably looking at 10 to 15 blue blood programs a year, and thankfully Florida's one of those. But once you get outside of that top 15, it's hard to crack into there, and a lot of that has to do with facilities. A lot of that has to do with the money the program's willing to spend on a head coach. Ohio State went after Urban Meyer, not because of his coaching acumen. They went after him because he was going to bring in the best players. And, that's what's happened. So, I think one of the nice things is that when you're competing, that, everybody gets better. And so, 10 years ago, if you didn't have to compete with Nick Saban, did you necessarily get better? And the great part is when Florida starts winning again on a regular basis and can compete with Alabama in the SEC championship game, it's going to be that much sweeter because we'll have Darth Vader on the other side to compete against.
Yeah, for sure. definitely would be, Saban kind of started his, route to dominating the SEC by unseating Urban Meyer. It would be nice if Florida could finally turn around and kind of, give back that with Jim McElwain there. We kind of talked about it with Ben Troupe before we wrap up here. Will, in your mind, since this is the first time we've had you on Gators Breakdown, and everybody is pointing to that Michigan game, game one. How big of a game, in your opinion, is this for Jim McElwain and the team?
I think the Michigan game is probably going to end up being a little bit overrated, regardless of whether they win or lose. I mean, it doesn't really impact your SEC championship hopes. It's a good start. I mean, obviously, you win that game and it builds momentum. I'll tell you, the important games, just as they always are Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida State. I mean, those are the games. You win those rivalry games, and the recruits come to you. And you can look at it and you can say stars don't matter, but they do. The reality is you got to bring in those guys. And so the way you do that is by beating Florida State and by beating Georgia. And if you can win those two games and you can win them convincingly, and if you can compete with Alabama in the SEC championship game, I don't know that you necessarily need to win the game. Obviously, that would be nice, but I do think that you need to put up a bigger fight than we have the last 2 years. And if you do that, then the recruits come in. Somebody like Justin Fields maybe says, hey, they are a quarterback away. And I do think, I think that the defense may take a step back in 2017, but I think the defense is going to be ready to go in 2018. And so then the question is, who do you have there behind center to pick up, to drive the program forward at that point?
Yeah, I do hate to downplay, probably the biggest opener Florida has ever had against Michigan, but you're right. Everything, if you lose that game, everything is still in front of you. And I hate using that excuse sometimes, but it really is. And but how better would Gator Nation feel about Jim McElwain if a quarterback, whoever it is, has a good game against a Michigan team, a hardball defense that is going to be good? That defensive line for Michigan that they're bringing in is definitely going to be one of the nation's best. I mean, I think just for Gator Nation and the outlook of Jim McElwain, if you win that game, I think, the good outweighs, if you lose that game, I think the high of that game can be higher than the bad of that game can be if you lose. I think fans will kind of overreact and Florida loses, especially if it's in blowout fashion. Now that might change some things, but I really think a win does much better. A lot better than I think losing that game. The bad, there's not as much damage. I think if you look at it that way.
Oh, no, I definitely think so. I think, I'm a fan too, right? I'm a fan first. I'm an alum, so I'm going to be watching that game and I'm going to be screaming just as loud as anybody if they get blown out. And certainly I'll go back and take a look at the tape and try to figure out why. The thing is they've got so long to prepare for that first game. I think that's why a blowout becomes a problem, because if you've had that long to prepare and you still get smoked, then that means that you just don't have the talent on the field, or that there's something really wrong with the coaching. I mean, those are the two options, right? If you get absolutely smoked. And so that's the real situation, I think, where things can start to go downhill. And you saw it a little bit with Muschamp in that 4-8 season, where all of a sudden they're having crazy stuff happen. I think his last year he had the block punt to end the game against South Carolina, and you get those sorts of things that start to snowball. And the crowd's booing the team in the swamp and those sorts of things, and you can see something snowballing to that level. But McElwain's had so much success his first 2 years. I've really been impressed with the way he's coached. I know some people complain about the offensive productivity, but he has shown that he's willing to take risks, that he's willing to go for it on fourth down. And if you look at it, he's won 79% of games that have been less than 7 points. So when you look at, most of the time those are 50-50 games. If he's winning those things 79% of the time, it means his team is prepared, it means his team is showing up, and it means that when they're not outclassed from a talent standpoint, they usually find a way to win. And so that's really the key to me, is the talent level to the point where now that kind of thing can take place. Because if you're winning 80% of your games that are close, man, you're going to have some really good seasons.
Yeah, and and to play devil's advocate a little bit there, maybe some of those games shouldn't have been as close. With some teams you probably should be blowing out, but you're right. He finds, but you mentioned, he finds a way to win the game, and in 2 seasons as well, he's found a game against an SEC West opponent that he wasn't supposed to win, that he did win. And that was Ole Miss's first year and LSU last year. So, there's 2 games to point to where he's won games he wasn't supposed to. Now, the big games you're supposed to win that you're not supposed to, FSU and Alabama, complete blowouts. So, yeah, there's still, we know, we've mentioned it many times, there's still a long way to go from Jim McElwain. But I like what you said. There's enough to point to there that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I still see more positive with Jim McElwain and this team than I do more negative.
Yeah, well, and look on the bright side. We could have Butch Jones as our head coach, right? So, yeah, I mean, you look at him, and he's winning 50% of those close games. And 2 years ago against Tennessee is a perfect example of that, where, Butch Jones could have gone for 2 when they got up by 12 in the fourth quarter, and he decides not to go for 2, and that sets up the Callaway play that wins the game at the end. And if Butch Jones had just gone for 2 and made it, then the game's tied rather than Tennessee being a point behind. And those are the kinds of mistakes McElwain doesn't make. And he's now brought in a kicker who makes absolutely everything. I mean, the guy's unbelievable. And so, they're not sacrificing points on kicking. They're not going to be he's got such a huge leg. They're not going to be sacrificing field position on kickoffs. All those little edges that make up for the slight differences in talent, that all of a sudden when your talent is equivalent or at least close, and your quarterback is, as Bill likes to say, functional, I mean, at some point then you're able to compete with those big boys just because you're starting to make those little gains on the edges.
Well, one more little prediction before I let you go here, but we'll get you on before football season starts anyway, and you may change an answer or whatever, but do you believe, and I guess you can define fix, but do you believe Florida fixes their quarterback problem this year?
Before Zaire transferred, I would have said yes, just because they would have at least known what they had. My concern is that, if Zaire gets his 6th year of eligibility, so he's going to petition the NCAA for a 6th year because of his broken ankle at Notre Dame. If he gets that 6th year of eligibility, then I think him coming here is really a home run for McElwain, because 2 years of Zaire is a really big deal. But if they only have 1 year of Zaire, the problem is they're going to be good enough. And this isn't really a problem, but they're going to be good enough to be able to compete for the SEC East. And so Franks isn't going to get a lot of meaningful snaps, assuming that Zaire wins the job. And so, Franks isn't getting any meaningful snaps. You're back in the same place going into 2018 talking about the same stuff. But now you've got somebody like Fields, you've got Allen, or potentially Fields, you've got Allen coming in with a 2nd year, Trask is back there. And, it's just it ends up being the same mess that it is right now. If I'd had to predict a month ago, I would have said, yeah, they're going to have the quarterback situation figured out. But with Zaire, like I said, if he gets that 6th year of eligibility, I think that's a big deal. I mean, that's something that I think Gator fans should really be watching, that if he gets that 6th year, it'll make a difference.
All right, so it seems like you're probably leaning Zaire, but my thing is, do you think it's good enough for 2017? Okay, I guess good enough would be winning the SEC East again. So does Florida, as a little prediction, is the quarterback play good enough to win the SEC East?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think when you look at it, the only thing that prevents that from happening is if Eason at Georgia just goes nuts. Yeah. And so, that's the reality, is if Eason goes crazy and starts chucking the ball all over the place and Georgia can put up 45 points a game, it's going to be pretty difficult. But if Georgia ends up doing what Georgia always does, which is blow a game or two that they shouldn't, and Tennessee's going to lose to Vanderbilt or something again this year just because they always do that.
Hey, Butch hasn't beat Muschamp yet.
Well, I mean, that's awesome. It'll be the only thing he ever did that's good for us. So, I mean, I think that's really what it boils down to. And I think the home schedule really makes a difference for Florida. So the LSU debacle last year was a big pain, but going into LSU and winning that game set Florida up for an unbelievable home schedule this year, because they've got 2 neutral site games with Georgia and Michigan, and then they got 3 true road games, and they're against sort of the bottom half of the SEC. And so you're sitting there looking at that going, okay, well, everybody's coming to our house to play. And really, Florida historically has won at a much higher clip at home than they have on the road. Now, some of that is because they're playing Eastern Middle Tennessee State at home to open the season. But, I mean, the truth remains that if you look at even elite games when they're playing top 25 teams, they play much better at home than on the road. And so, I can envision a scenario where they win 10 or 11 games just on the fact that their road schedule isn't that difficult. Their home schedule is where the difficult games are.
For sure. Well, man, I can't thank you enough for helping me out and filling in for Joey and Bill.
Oh, man, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. We'll definitely get you back on, even if Joey and Bill are on. It may be a little crowded, but we may have to do a 4-man show one night.
Well, that sounds good because Bill and I will have to gang up on Joey because he doesn't seem to like our stats. So.
I can play devil's advocate either way, so I'm good. I'm good. I like to do that. So yeah, we have Ben Troupe on. So that was really good stuff from Ben, and his look back at his time at Florida and what this current Gator team holds. Remember, folks, you can find all your Gators Breakdown episodes on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. You can find Will on Twitter at Will Miles SEC and his articles on SEC Country. So for David Waters, this has been Gators Breakdown. We'll see you later.